especially in Malaysia, these kind of situations, these kind of conditions, they're not widely spoken about.
At that time when she was born, it was quite frightening for me. And later on, I felt a lot of guilt also because actually the initial thing when I felt when she was born is that I thought, oh, my life is going to change.
What's your perspective on families who have children with autism, ADHD, maybe mild and then maybe in a bit more severe, where it can really affect their communication and their quality of life?
Yep. I think a lot of this thing goes undiagnosed. When I came to terms with it, I realized that it's not because I love my child any less, but I'm very fearful about my child in larger society, especially in Malaysia and in Asia,
Yes.
because people have very, very negative view about disability.
Right, guys, hello, welcome to another episode of the Inwords and Onwards podcast. My guest today is Miss Li Hsian.
Hello.
Welcome.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
It's kind of fun doing this, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, like coming out, you set up, you have like the whole experience, you have a bit of a plan. But at the end of the day, it's just we're here for a chat, talking about something that's very close to my heart, which is inclusive education,
Okay.
and something which is very close to your heart, which is Down syndrome.
Yes.
Yeah. So starting with yourself, you have a very interesting background. I've been reading some of your writings for Makcik.
Thank you.
Yeah, so you're a writer. You're also working with the Ilham Gallery.
Yep.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I actually am the co-facilitator of the art discovery tours at Ilham Gallery, where I've been doing it since 2015. And we take children around the gallery on tours of the current exhibitions. So we usually select artworks where we actually bring children around and we talk to them about the artworks and use the artworks as a way to help them understand lots of things around them, like geography, history, politics. So we actually use the artworks to as a window into other things. And we also do a lot of other children's programs. For example, we do art and science. So we don't do the typical thing that's out there in the market where it's just a lot of art, copy-paste art. We actually, we have things, we talk about science, talk about art, and then we do a project that's related to art and science. And we also even do art and coding, where we look at a piece of art and we figure out a way to make that piece of art into a game or an animation.
That must be pretty popular. with
Yes,
kids.
yes, very popular and various other things. So we want children to see art as not as something like frivolous. A lot of parents, especially Asian parents, they don't really think art is very important. They don't, but actually creativity and art is very important for children's lives today. More so today than ever because we have all these things like AI and digital things coming. So we need a lot more. We need children to be unique, have a unique viewpoint and a unique voice. So I think the only way they can do it if they have a lot of exposure to different things.
And art is one of those. It's one of those innate human traits. Like,
Yes.
It transcends culture. It transcends
Yep.
religion or anything. So I think if someone can appreciate art, it's a deeply human experience, and especially like you said, with the way the technology is changing and
Yep.
AI. If there's anything that AI can't do, we know it can try to do
Yeah.
art, but
Yeah.
art we know is really a human thing.
Yes, yes.
That's cool. That's really cool. And then you also had a background in corporate communication.
Yes.
Yeah.
Actually, my real background is in accounting and finance.
Right.
But then after I moved along. I guess you kind of you get into your true nature. After a while, I was in school. I was not very good at numbers, but somehow I ended up, because I'm Asian and maybe my parents didn't really push me, but I think I felt obligation because they were paying for my education. I had to do something very practical. But then in the end, I think if you're true to yourself, you move towards something that you really like and you really want to do. So so I ended up in corporate communications, which was good because it still used my corporate background. But then so I handled a lot of some lifestyle accounts at that time when I was working for corporate communications, like mobile companies. So it's like a marriage between kind of also lifestyle and also corporate work.
Cool. And that you've kept that you've kind of evolved it now with the writing that you're doing.
Yes,
You
I've gone
can
more into
see,
parenting. Yeah.
yeah, but you can see it's very the articles are very professional.
Thank
They're very
you.
good. They're very good.
Yep.
And so then you as a mom,
Yes.
you have lovely twins. I've
Yep.
had the good fortune of being a mentor to them and a coach, and they're great kids.
Thank you.
And so can we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. They just turned 11 in June. I have a boy and a girl and a boy actually, because the girl, she's older by 3 minutes, but she's a child with Down syndrome, and my boy, he's neurotypical, or what you say is like a regular kid, and so Isha, when they're called Isha and Akash, and I didn't know actually about Isha's condition until she was born. Actually, we did all the tests and everything. They said it's low risk, and then the scans never showed anything. So when she was born, actually, it was quite a shock to me and my family, because we found out on the day of the birth, and they kind of whisked her away for a lot of tests. So in the end, we found out that she's a child with Down syndrome. So actually, the first year was very, very difficult for us. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, especially in Malaysia, these kind of situations, these kind of conditions, they're not widely spoken about. They're not widely. People are not very. Not to say that in where I come from, back in the UK, that people are necessarily educated. But especially in Malaysia, from my 9 years here, I've seen there's not a lot of infrastructure for
Yes.
people who need some sort of extra support in their lives.
Yep.
And so, can you tell us a little bit about the Malaysian experience, and maybe if there's some lessons learned that you can share? I read a little bit that there was an institute that was useful to you in the beginning.
Yep. So I was in a way, it was lucky she had Down syndrome, and a lot of people always say, oh, she's lucky to have you and your husband as a parent. But actually, in the end, I feel that I'm quite lucky to have a child like her, because I have a different parenting experience. It makes me a different parent. Maybe because if I didn't have a kid like her, maybe I would be the usual Chinese tiger mom. I would focus on academic stuff. I would focus on achievements. I would focus on a lot of the things that a lot of parents today focus on. But at that time when she was born, it was quite frightening for me. And later on, I felt a lot of guilt also, because actually the initial thing when I felt when she was born is that I thought, oh, my life is going to change. I'm just going to be this, I had a lot of things going. I was doing part-time writing. At that time I was working in the PR agency, and I had a lot of other things, and I had quite a rich life around me. But then I thought, oh, my children would just add a little bit more color into my life. But then I felt like I was going to be consumed by all these special needs things, But I had to do those things anyway. My first year was full of medical visits. We had to get her ears checked, her eyes checked every 3 months. Her heart, she had these 2 holes in her heart. And then one hole it closed naturally. And then at 5, she actually went for a pretty, not very major, but quite major surgery, where she inserted a coil in her heart to block the other hole that didn't close by itself. And she had 4 ear surgeries. Recently, last year, she had a major dental surgery because she had to fix some things with her bite and everything. So actually it was, and then every week there was therapy. I had 3 or 4 different types of therapies. And then I had to see a lot of different doctors. And then, like you said, the infrastructure is not so good. But we were lucky because my husband and I, we had resources. So actually, if a child like that was born to a family with kind of lower economic circumstances, it's very difficult, because there is nothing very good to support a child like that. And I think it's very difficult for a lot of people. So I was very lucky. We also had this Kiwanis Down Syndrome Foundation National Center. It's been around for almost 35 years now, I think, more than 30 years at least. It was set up by the Kiwanis Club of Kuala Lumpur. And it's Kiwanis Club of Kuala Lumpur has become synonymous with Down syndrome, but Down syndrome is not the only thing they do. But because this school is now so synonymous with the condition, and all the children who are born with Down syndrome, you have your start there, and so they actually take in kids from 2 months old, and they keep them there until they are 7. So from 2 months old, actually they have a lot of therapists that work there. They give them a kind of early education, therapy-led education. So they have physios there, they have OTs there, they used to have some speech therapists. I don't know whether they still do. And in the initial years, for very minimal amount of money, you could go there weekly. And it kind of provides a support system as well, because there are other parents with children like yours. So it's kind of like you can talk to them, talk about your frustration, your challenges. So you don't feel so alone, I find that it was very good to have this. In fact, I feel that children in other kind of special needs categories like autism and ADHD, they don't have this. So it's quite hard for them because they operate in silos everywhere unless they have some close friends who have similar children, and then they talk to them. So for me, we started there at 2 months, but you have to quickly accept your child's condition. Not everybody can also accept. I was very lucky. My husband's very supportive. My mother was helping me at that time, and then I had a confinement lady. And then shortly after that, my new live-in came. So I have a support system at home. Everybody in my family and in my in-laws, all very supportive. So quickly, I wasn't really in the best condition, but I had to quickly accept it and go in. So that's when she started, and she was there until she was about 2.5 years. And they're still doing very good work. And every year, in fact, I want to say this, they don't receive any help from the government. So they do fundraising every year. If you have time, you should join. Every year they do like a treasure hunt. They do a big treasure hunt. This year is going to Taiping for 2 days, and they raise money from the treasure hunt or some big fun fair that they have. So all the funding goes into these programs for children, especially those people who cannot afford. They will fully sponsor their school fees. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a very amazing organization.
Yeah. And I want to go in a little bit. You touched on autism and ADHD, and I want to include them throughout the kind of conversation as well. And so in terms of autism and ADHD, I think can go very under the radar.
Yes.
I think I know plenty of people who are undiagnosed. It's not my place to say.
Yep.
It's not my place to judge, and we're going to speak more about judging people.
Yep.
And setting expectations for them. But in terms of what's your perspective on families who have children with autism, ADHD, maybe mild and then maybe in a bit more severe, where it can really affect their communication and their quality of life?
Yep.
What's your observation on that?
I also don't know a lot about these conditions, but of course, being in a special needs kind of community, we do come in contact with larger groups of other people who are not in our child's thing. So sometimes they have these big neurodivergent events, right? So there will be everybody there. I would say yes. I think a lot of this thing goes undiagnosed because And it also affected me when I was when I became a new parent to a child like Isha, because I felt that I feel that when we have a child like this, we feel quite guilty. You feel guilty because you have these thoughts like my life going to change. I'm going to be like consumed with her, and you feel guilty. Like sometimes you feel like is when you say those things, whether is it because you don't really love your child, you want to grieve for the child you didn't have. Because I mean, I was going to have twins. I thought of all these things they were going to do together, grow up together, do the same things together. And then it's a girl and a boy. And of course, usually as a mom, sometimes you the daughter, you feel like you can do all the daughter things with your daughter. So you have these feelings. But then later on, when I came to terms with it, I realized that it's not because I love my child any less, but I'm very fearful about my child in larger society, especially in Malaysia and in Asia,
Yes.
because people have very, very, very a very kind of negative view about disability. Okay, and disability has its own negative things and challenges, but disability for me, I feel it doesn't mean that not strong. You can be strong in a different way. So I think for ADHD and ASD, and I want to clarify that actually for Down syndrome, people always talk about it in the context of ASD, like autism spectrum disorder, like a spectrum. But actually, Down syndrome is not a spectrum. Down syndrome, you have varying different kind of medical conditions. Sometimes some are born with very bad heart condition. They have to have open heart surgery as babies. They have hearing problems. They have eyesight problems. Of course, they are slow learners largely, and they have this thing called hypotonia, which is low muscle tone. Which is why exercise becomes very important. And in the beginning, the early years, physiotherapy and occupational therapy are very important. So it's not a spectrum. It's just a cocktail of medical condition. And depending on what medical condition your child is born with, then you get certain things you have to deal with. I mean, if you have a heart problem, you wouldn't be able to go to kindergarten for a long time because you were always going in and out of hospital. So ASD is different. It's a spectrum. ADHD, I'm not so sure, but it's also, I think it's a kind of also, like you said, can be mild or severe, right? I think the main thing all parents with special needs face is we worry about acceptance of the child in general society and general education, because they're different. They're just different. And they will approach learning differently, and they will also behave differently, and they need some management strategies. And not everybody is trained to manage children like them. So that is the main problem with having, and that's why a lot of parents, like for Down syndrome, actually people always say, because Down syndrome look a certain way. Actually, it's not true also. There's a lot of Down syndrome children with Down syndrome, they not necessarily have the Down syndrome facial traits or whatever. It's all muscle. It's all muscle tone. If you work on the muscle, like Isha worked on her muscles for her facial muscles when she was young, she has very taut facial muscles. Her tongue doesn't stick out. It's all muscle. The people forget the tongue is also a muscle. The cheeks are muscle. All the things muscle. So maybe for Down syndrome, people say you can identify, you can see that they have Down syndrome. Okay, maybe largely, but maybe for ADHD and autism, because it's diagnosed later.
Yeah.
So so sometimes when even parents, they do diagnose it, but they won't reveal it to the school, because again, don't want your child to be treated differently. But my stand is actually honesty is the best thing, because if you are not honest about your child's condition, a lot of these things that they display is labeled as behavioral problem.
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's
And
the
I
main
think
thing.
that a lot of time they see it as a behavioral issue, and
Yes.
sometimes it's a little bit of a shame on the kid. Now, in my generation, there's a lot of people who are realizing, I'm on the
That's
spectrum.
right. Yeah.
I didn't know I had ADHD
Yeah,
until
yeah.
recently, and then
Correct.
I got friends like that,
Yeah.
So it's something that later on you realize, and then it becomes like a life hack
Yes.
where you're like, hey, I actually understand how my brain is geared.
Yes,
You know,
yes.
I didn't understand that I was like, putting petrol in a diesel engine or something
Yeah,
like that.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's right.
So then, thank you for explaining about the kind of the special needs community in Malaysia and what it's like in the early stages for you, and then how is it in terms of school? And that's one of the big things in a kid's life, right? And
Yep.
in where I'm from, it's very simple. You go to the school in your village.
Yes,
That's it.
yes.
It's very straightforward. For me, there was always the punishment of boarding school looming over me. If you keep this up, you'll be away to boarding school, and yeah. But I mean, for the vast majority of people, you just go to your local school. KL, very very different. There's there Even if people are going into an SK or an SJKC, they're often having a think about which one.
Yes.
And then there's also a huge number of international schools, going from the ones that are international school labeled, but in reality, they're not
Yeah.
really
Just like a shop house, right?
international.
Sometimes a shop
Yeah.
house.
Yeah. And then you've got the ones that are well established. You've got a lot of new ones. And then even schools that used to be expatriate schools, like,
Yep.
for example, Lycée Français, that one is now an international school. And so, huge market. So, what was it like having a child with Down syndrome, not only a child with Down syndrome, and looking for a school?
Yeah, it was quite difficult. I would say here in Malaysia, government doesn't really do a good job with inclusiveness in government school because they follow this method called in the beginning, in the beginning, children with disabilities don't go to school. You keep them at home, right? And then they just really kind of like languish and rot at home. It's really bad. And I know this because I have an older relative, and she was just kept at home. Actually, she had high fever. A lot of that time, a lot of people had high fever when they were babies, and then they have some form of cognitive disability because of those things, and then they just they are slow learners, so they just keep them at home. So that's not great. But then later on, they move into something. Now they have something called integration model, where you go to a special class in a certain government schools, and then they. But the problem is they put all the disabilities together. So they will put like people with ASD, ADHD, Down syndrome, physical disability. There's also a lot of other rare conditions, and they put them all together in one classroom and they teach them together. And imagine the teacher has to handle all these people in one class. It's not easy. So even if they're trained also, it's not easy for that teacher. And then they say like during break time, they will mingle with other students. But I mean, the reality is regular children who are also not taught to be inclusive are not going to reach out to these kids also, because children, I mean, let's be honest, children are quite feral and they are brutal in their own way. They not children are not naturally kind. You have to be shown and guided. So the thing is, so this is the government system currently at the moment. It's different in some countries. I think, and we don't have a social welfare assistance from the government. If we want to, like in the UK, I think if you can go to a local school, but if you have a child with special needs, you can apply for an aid to be with your
Correct.
child.
Yeah.
You will get certain allowances, I think, for therapy, and so at least the child is supported in school, and people know that people will come forward to admit that the child has conditions because they can get the support from the government. But here, very little support. A lot of it, there is actually very good public sector medical support and paramedical support, but it's like government hospital, you have to wait for a very long time, and then you have to stay in the hospital, and you don't know who you're going to see actually. So it's problematic. Then so basically, if you can afford it, you will go for the private options. And even private options, you can have resources, but not everybody will want to take your kid in. That's why people are also, they will, if it's a bit mild, they won't say, because the minute you say, maybe some schools say no, can't handle it, I don't really want your kid. So even at kindergarten level, I had this issue already, and not all, now maybe better. We went to luckily in a neighborhood, we had a nice kindergarten. They were very inclusive. The headmistress, teacher Jane, was very inclusive, and in fact, while Isha was in school, we were open about it. There were some other children that had certain behavioral issue, but because that school is so sensitive to differences and diversity, they noticed certain things about the other kids, and they brought it to the attention of those parents, and those parents managed to get those children diagnosed. So it's actually quite interesting. So I think if a school is actually quite inclusive, the school will be inclusive and sensitive to every child's little quirks and needs, and then whether or not they have a disability, they will be sensitive to what they need. So she was there for a while. After she left Kiwanis, she went to the inclusive kindergarten. There was 1 year, in fact, we doubled up. She spent mornings at the Kiwanis, and then mornings in the kindergarten and afternoons in Kiwanis. So she was very resilient actually. And after that, we went to normal school. I grew up in government system, and I like government system actually because it's very multicultural. And I learned BM, and I had a very nice experience growing up in school in Johor. I went to a convent school, but there's no way I could put my daughter in the government system. And so we looked for private schools, and actually we went to 14 schools. Some school even claim to have special needs expert teachers and all these things, but I was rejected by one. My top choice, totally rejected by that school. After we went for a trial, I paid for the trial, and I was really angry and very upset with them, because after that they told me all sorts of things about her. They said they had a special needs expert, no? They said, but then Isha, there's a lot of staircases in this school, so she can't climb those staircases. And then she's not physically disabled, and then don't know whether she can manage all these things and blah blah blah. Then she gave them really bad. But your son can come to the school if you want. We can admit your son. So they didn't even have the courtesy to call me directly and explain this to me on the phone. They wrote me an email. And then they called the marketing person to talk to me. I mean, I thought the teacher should have called me and told me. Then very, very upsetting. Then after a while, I realized you don't really need experts. You just need a school that has caring teachers and staff and a caring outlook for children. And I think for us, we wanted our children to be in the same school. So I needed a school that was also robust enough for my regular kid. So that's how we ended up in the school we did today. That school doesn't ask me for an aide, because they feel if they need an aide, then they don't want to admit her. They want her to build a relationship with the teacher and her friends, instead of having another adult hanging around her all the time. Yeah. So that's how we decided on this school. And so far, I mean, it's working out, but we have to do a lot of work with advocacy, and we have to talk to them a lot, and to adapt things.
And you think that there's a lot of work that's happening with you guys in terms of the prep, in terms of like helping prepare for school, helping homework. Do you think that's the main thing, or is it more, do you mean more like trying to help the school?
Yeah, I think a little bit of both. I think sometimes if you have the right school environment where the teachers are quite caring and they have the right mindset, actually sometimes I think most teachers are quite good, but sometimes there's so much work nowadays for teachers, and children are not that easy to handle, because I think children these days they're very like aware of a lot of things. They're always online and everything, and they have certain influences that influence their behavior. They're not like children in my time when I was small, we are very obedient. You know, you go to your mother's friend's house, your mother said, don't do anything. Better sit there. You know, don't touch anything on the table. Don't open people's food. Also, you wait until you have to look at me first. Then you can go and take the food, right? Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you're grown on this kind of parenting style. But now it's like you can't tell children what to do, right? So I think it's a little bit of both. But I think teachers, maybe I feel teachers largely need to understand what it is, and teachers need to feel supported. So if when they feel supported, then maybe they're more willing to do more with the child. And sometimes they don't know how. I have to show them how to break it down for her. Yeah. So that's what I've been doing for the last 6 years since she was in school. Yeah.
Okay. I'd like to take a little break.
Okay.
And then when we come back, we talk about inclusive education.
Okay.
Okay? All right.